At its peak, Vlasic Pickles controlled 36% of the entire American pickle market. They were the only national pickle brand in the country, selling over $200 million worth of pickles every single year. The iconic stork mascot was as recognizable as Ronald McDonald. Vlasic was the pickle. But just 3 years after one pricing deal with Walmart, Vlasic Foods International filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, sold off for pennies on the dollar, and became a cautionary tale taught in business schools across America. How does a company go from total market dominance to financial collapse in less time than it takes to get a college degree? That's what we're uncovering today. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how Vlasic rose to become America's pickle king, why their business model seemed unstoppable, and how a single decision to partner with the world's largest retailer turned their greatest strength into their fatal weakness. And if you stick around until the end, I'll show you the empty building in Imlay City, Michigan, the place where it all began, and why what's inside tells you everything you need to know about what went wrong. Because this isn't just a story about pickles. It's about what happens when short-term wins become long-term suicide. Let's go back to 1942. World War II is raging. Food rationing is everywhere. And in Detroit, Michigan, a man named Frank Vlasic is running a small dairy route with his family. Frank's son, Joseph, notices something. Women on their route keep asking for one thing that's hard to find: good, homemade-style pickles. Not the mass-produced stuff. Real pickles. The kind their grandmothers used to make. So Joseph does the opposite of what every other food company is doing during wartime. He stops playing it safe. He pivots the entire business from dairy to pickles. They set up their first pickle plant in Imlay City, Michigan, and they focus on one thing: quality. Here's what made Vlasic different from day one. They invented hot pack pickles. Pickles that didn't need refrigeration. This was huge. It meant grocery stores could stock them on regular shelves. It meant longer shelf life. It meant wider distribution. While competitors were stuck in the refrigerated section with limited space, Vlasic Pickles could go anywhere. The timing was perfect. Post-World War II America was booming. Supermarkets were exploding across the country. Families wanted convenience, and Vlasic gave it to them. Between 1933 and the 1970s, per capita pickle consumption in America jumped from about 2 pounds per person to over 8 pounds. That's a 300% increase. People weren't just eating more pickles, they were craving them, and Vlasic was there to feed that craving. By the 1970s and 80s, Vlasic had become a household name. In 1974, they introduced their famous mascot, the Vlasic stork, originally voiced by actor Ron Masek. The ads were brilliant. They linked pickle cravings to pregnant women, making Vlasic synonymous with that irresistible urge for something salty and crunchy. The stork wasn't just a mascot, it was cultural shorthand. Under the Vlasic brand, they launched dozens of products: dill pickles, bread and butter pickles, relishes, pepperoncini, jalapenos. They weren't just a pickle company, they were the pickle aisle. And here's the kicker: they were the only national pickle brand in America. Everyone else was regional. Vlasic was everywhere. So what was Vlasic's unfair advantage? Why could they grow when others couldn't? 3 things. First, they had distribution scale no competitor could match. When you're national and everyone else is regional, you get better deals with grocery chains, better shelf placement, better everything. Scale creates more scale. Second, they had brand recognition that money couldn't buy. The stork wasn't just advertising, it was embedded in American culture. When people thought pickle, they thought Vlasic. That's priceless. Third, And this is the big one. They had Campbell's Soup Company behind them. In 1978, Vlasic was acquired by Campbell's Soup, one of the most powerful food conglomerates in America. Suddenly, Vlasic had access to Campbell's resources, their supply chain expertise, their advertising budgets, their corporate infrastructure. They invested heavily in R&D. They innovated constantly. They dominated shelf space in every grocery store in the country. This was the engine of growth. Vlasic didn't just make pickles. They made pickles at scale with a brand that couldn't be replicated, backed by one of the biggest food companies in the world. This allowed them to grow faster than anyone thought possible. By the late 1990s, Vlasic held 36% of the U.S. pickle market and was generating around $200 million in annual sales. No other pickle brand came close. By the late 1990s, Vlasic looked unstoppable. They were in every supermarket, every grocery chain, every convenience store. You couldn't escape the stork. The brand had become so powerful that it was basically synonymous with the word pickle itself. If you like my video, please subscribe my channel. In 1999, they launched Vlasic Hamburger Stackers, oversized pickle slices designed specifically for burgers. It was a hit. Consumers loved it. Retailers loved it. Vlasic was innovating, expanding, winning. The company wasn't just profitable, it was culturally dominant. Vlasic ads were everywhere. Sponsorships were everywhere. Media coverage celebrated them as an American success story. This was the moment, the peak, the point where it seemed like nothing could go wrong, except something already had. In March 1998, Campbell's Soup made a decision. They spun off Vlasic into an independent company called Vlasic Foods International. On paper, this looked like a strategic win. Vlasic would be free to operate independently, make its own decisions, focus purely on growth. Campbell was reshaping its portfolio, and Vlasic was ready to stand on its own. But here's what didn't make headlines. The spin-off came with roughly $500 to $560 million in debt loaded onto Vlasic's balance sheet. $500 million in debt. For a company generating $200 million in annual sales. Let me put that in perspective. Vlasic now owed more than twice what it made in a year. Their debt-to-revenue ratio was catastrophic. Even in the best-case scenario, they'd be spending years just servicing interest payments instead of reinvesting in the brand. This wasn't a death sentence. Plenty of companies carry heavy debt and survive. But it meant Vlasic had zero margin for error. Every decision had to be perfect. Every quarter had to perform. Every deal had to generate cash flow. The problem? They were about to make a deal that did the opposite. This worked in the short term, but it planted the seeds of something dangerous. Around 1998 to 1999, Vlasic's leadership faced a problem. Sales of pickles were declining. Not just for Vlasic, across the entire industry. Per capita consumption was flattening. The market was mature. And Vlasic, now saddled with massive debt, needed growth immediately. Then Walmart came knocking. Walmart, in the late 1990s, was becoming the most powerful retailer in human history. They were growing faster than any store chain ever had. And they had a reputation, everyday low prices. If you wanted access to Walmart's customers, and you did, you played by Walmart's rules. Walmart proposed a deal to Vlasic. They would sell gallon-sized jars of Vlasic pickles for $2.97 each. A gallon jar. For under $3. Vlasic's leadership saw this as a golden opportunity. Volume. Exposure. Shelf dominance in the biggest retail chain in America. And that's when the compounding failures began. At $2.97 per gallon jar, Vlasic was making 1 or 2 cents in profit per jar. Sometimes none at all. The product was essentially being sold at cost. Every jar they sold made them almost nothing. But the volume was massive. Walmart was moving 240,000 gallons of Vlasic Pickles every single week. That's nearly 12.5 million gallons a year. The numbers looked incredible, except they were losing money on every single one. Here's what Vlasic didn't anticipate. When you sell someone a gallon jar of pickles for $2.97, they don't come back for more pickles anytime soon. A gallon jar is a year's supply for most families. So consumers stopped buying Vlasic's smaller, more profitable jars at regular grocery stores. Why pay $3.99 for a quart when you can get a gallon at Walmart for $2.97? Sales of their premium products collapsed. The Walmart deal wasn't adding to their business. It was replacing their profitable business with an unprofitable one. Vlasic had spent decades building a premium brand image. They were the quality pickle. The pickle you trusted. The pickle you paid a little more for because it was worth it. But now, they were the cheap pickle. The discount pickle. The pickle you bought in bulk because it was basically free. The brand went from premium to bargain bin in less than 2 years. And once that perception sets in, you can't undo it. Vlasic had devalued their own brand in the eyes of millions of consumers. By the peak of the deal, Walmart accounted for 30% of Vlasic's total sales. Nearly 1/3 of their entire business depended on one retailer. If you like my video, please subscribe my channel. When Vlasic finally realized they were bleeding out, they went to Walmart and begged them to raise the price. Walmart said no. Then Vlasic tried again. And Walmart threatened to drop all Vlasic products from their stores if the price changed. Think about that. Vlasic couldn't raise prices without risking 30% of their revenue disappearing overnight. They were trapped. Eventually, Walmart allowed Vlasic to switch to half-gallon jars at a slightly higher price. But even that didn't restore profitability. The damage was done. Remember that $500+ million in debt? With collapsing profit margins, Vlasic couldn't generate the cash flow to service those debt payments. Every quarter, the situation got worse. Increased sales volume wasn't translating to increased profit. It was the opposite. The more they sold to Walmart, the more money they lost. The business model had become fundamentally broken. There wasn't one single moment where Vlasic collapsed. It was a slow unraveling. But if you had to point to the point of no return, it was this. By late 2000, Vlasic's financial situation had become unsustainable. They were losing money quarter after quarter. Their debt obligations were coming due. Their cash reserves were gone. And their biggest customer, Walmart, was still demanding low prices. The company tried everything. Cost-cutting, layoffs, negotiations with creditors. But the math didn't work anymore. They couldn't sell enough pickles to cover their debt. And they couldn't raise prices without losing their biggest customer. In early 2001, the inevitable happened. On January 2001, Vlasic Foods International filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in Delaware courts. The company that once dominated the American pickle industry, that held 36% market share, that had been a household name for nearly 60 years, was bankrupt. The bankruptcy filing revealed the full extent of the disaster. Major debt payments had become impossible to meet. The Walmart pricing deal had gutted profitability. The spin-off debt had crushed them. It was a perfect storm of bad strategy and bad timing. But here's what's interesting: Vlasic didn't disappear. The bankruptcy allowed the company to restructure. Assets were put up for sale. And in a twist, H.J. Heinz stepped in and bought Vlasic's pickle and barbecue sauce divisions for approximately $195 million. Analysts called it a bargain. Heinz got one of the most recognizable food brands in America for a fraction of what it had been worth just a few years earlier. Later, the brand would change hands again. Pinnacle Foods acquired Vlasic. Then, in 2018, Conagra Brands acquired Pinnacle Foods, and with it, Vlasic. Today, in 2025, Vlasic still exists. You can still buy Vlasic Pickles. They're still in stores across America. The stork is still on the label. But Vlasic Foods International, the independent company that once owned it all, is gone forever. Remember that building I mentioned at the beginning? The one in Imlay City, Michigan? That was the site of the very first Vlasic pickle plant. The place where Joseph Vlasic bet everything on homemade-style pickles in 1942. The place where it all started. Today, that building sits quiet. The original plant is long gone. What remains is just another industrial property in a small Michigan town. I bring this up because it's symbolic. The place where Vlasic was born, where they built something from nothing, where they created a brand that would dominate an industry for decades, is now just an empty piece of real estate. The brand survived. But the company, the independent Vlasic Foods International that was supposed to thrive on its own, died because of a single decision to prioritize volume over value. The building in Imlay City is a reminder. Legacy means nothing if you trade long-term sustainability for short-term wins. The biggest lesson here is this: volume is not the same as value. Vlasic made the fatal mistake of believing that selling more pickles automatically meant success. But selling more at a loss doesn't make you profitable, it makes you bankrupt faster. They sacrificed margin for market share. They sacrificed brand equity for shelf space. They sacrificed control for convenience. And in the end, they lost everything. The Walmart deal wasn't just a bad pricing strategy. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of how business works. Profit margins matter. Brand positioning matters. Customer dependence matters. You can't sell your way to success if every sale loses money. This is why the Vlasic story is taught in business schools today. It's a perfect case study in how power imbalances between retailers and suppliers can destroy companies. Walmart had leverage. Vlasic had desperation. And desperation makes you accept deals you shouldn't. But here's the thing. Vlasic didn't have to take that deal. They chose volume over value. They chose short-term growth over long-term survival. And that choice killed them. The lesson isn't, don't work with Walmart. The lesson is, know your worth, protect your margins, and never let one customer control your fate. So here's my question for you. Was this inevitable? Could Vlasic have survived without the Walmart deal? Should they have refused? Or was the debt from the Campbell spin-off always going to kill them, and Walmart just sped up the timeline? And here's the bigger question. If you were running Vlasic in 1998, what would you have done differently? Would you have taken the Walmart deal and hoped for the best? Would you have walked away and risked losing market share? Or is there a third option no one saw? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because this story isn't just about pickles. It's about every business decision that trades tomorrow for today. If you like my video, please subscribe my channel.